Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary, for your testimony. I wanted to commend the State Department, you in particular, for quick statements with regard to the nature of the conversation as it was between President Putin and President Trump regarding certain individuals like Mr. McFaul and others traveling to Russia to be interrogated by the Russians. The State Department came out and said that was inappropriate, despite the President's statement that it was an incredible offer. It took the White House a full 2 days or 3 days to contradict that statement that President Putin had made, but the State Department quickly said that that was inappropriate. And so thank you for doing that.
Thanks. But Senator Flake, you give me a little bit too much credit. I'm doing my level best every day to implement the President's policies. And so that statement was from the United States President's State Department.
Okay, but the United States President said that it was an incredible offer. And so that's why I'm pointing out the difference and commending you. Please take it. With regard to what else was said during that meeting, I know you've given some indication of what was discussed. Let me just give a sense of how Russia is characterizing that meeting. And this is the problem with a private meeting like this. Many of us voiced strong concerns about having a private meeting like this with no readout officially for what happened. And here's what happens when a private meeting like that is held. Vladimir Putin's meeting with Donald Trump was, quote, better than super, Russia's top diplomat has said. The Leaders' Summit in Helsinki was fabulous. I think that was Lavrov who also said that. The remarks reported by Russian news agencies summed up the mood that Mr. Trump sided with the Kremlin over his own intelligence agency, so they're reporting that as well. Here's how one paper in Russia characterized it. Trump has failed to dominate Putin. Another tabloid said, a quiet, modest Trump has paled in comparison with Vladimir Putin. It's clear that Putin has outmaneuvered the U.S. president. That's the Russian media characterizing a meeting, and we have no readout to dispute any of it. All we have are the statements made by the president that they've made an incredible offer, for example, to have former U.S. diplomats shipped off to Russia to be interrogated. I'm glad to hear that a little more time will be had before a new meeting takes place between the two principals. By the way, I think that it's good that our president and the Russian president speak and meet together. That's a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing to meet in private with only an interpreter present with no readout, so that whatever is characterized is only characterized by the Russian side. So do you have any response or thoughts on that?
So I have a personal experience. I had a private conversation with North Koreans. We didn't issue a readout on the conversations quite intentionally, and the North Korean press chose to characterize it. We thought it was in America's best interest not to respond tit for tat about the nature of that conversation. We knew the truth. We knew what had taken place there. And, you know, it's the North Korean press. And so I assume that most reasonable people will discount it fairly significantly in the same way that one might the Russian press. These are important decisions about how much to disclose about private conversations were had, because everyone knows that you may have an expectation that you'll have another private conversation one day. And the absence of their belief that that private conversation has the capacity to remain in that space reduces the freedom to have those conversations. I know you've had this in your life too, Senator. I know you've had private conversations and you valued them. It was just you and someone else in that room, and it was important. And you didn't give anyone a readout from it because you wanted to have the chance to do that again, because you thought you could make real progress with that person.
Right. Let's talk about North Korea. You brought it up. You mentioned that you traveled to North Korea to continue on, as you put it, I guess, to follow up on commitments made in Singapore. Let's talk about those commitments for a minute. You mentioned that they have committed to denuclearization. They may have a different readout than we do on what that entails. But so far, they seem to be walking back any commitment, real commitment that was made there. What commitment, firm commitment, other than discussion of returning remains? I'm not discounting that, but in terms of denuclearization, what real commitments were made?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the private commitments that have been shared. I don't think it's fair to characterize them walking back from commitments. Remember where we were, right? So it all depends what you draw as the projected line to say, are we in a better place or a worse place than we would have been absent the Singapore summit? One can draw a counterfactual reference. We'll never know where we might have been. But I will concede there is an awful long way to go. I'm not trying to oversell the accomplishments that we've had towards the path of denuclearization to date. There remains a great deal of work to do. It will be highly contested. That is, the modalities, the means, the timing of this will be things that I'm confident we'll be discussing for a period of time. There have been public reports, and I know the United States is tracking the disassembly of a missile engine test site. Something that Chairman Kim committed orally. It wasn't in the written agreement itself, but Chairman Kim committed in his conversation with President Trump to do. They're beginning to dismantle that. It has to do with their missile program. It's a good thing. Steps forward.
Okay, thank you. Quickly, for the time is out, something completely different. The country of Rwanda right now, and you may be familiar with this because of this week's focus on religious freedom,
yes,
has indicated a move toward severe restrictions on religious freedom, particularly from outside groups. What are the plans of the State Department to let them know that is not in their own interest nor ours?
Senator, I share your concerns. I'll need to get back to you in terms of what actions we think we can take. I know we'll call it out. I know we'll label it for what it is. We do need to see it is tragic. And anyway, I share your concerns, Senator. It's a huge challenge for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Kane.